Hi, I'm Dennis Weiss. I work for Eagle Communications, but today I'm working for Dwight David Eisenhower with Why Like Ike. Welcome. Gosh, we're in my vacation of the future location right here. You didn't know that,
I
did
like
you?
that phrase.
Tim Reeves, Chelsea Milner, they're here to help us explain what goes on in this room, which is the research room. You're an archive technician. Technician. That means you fix things.
Okay.
Sort of. Okay.
She's a technical expert on how to do research at the
There we
Eisenhower
go.
Library.
Okay, that's great. You know, my son will be sitting in this room this afternoon, I think. He was with the sophomore class that just left here before we came in, and he'll be up at that table that says Middle East, and he's very happy. He told me there's a 150-page CIA report there, and 10 pages of it are redacted.
Very exciting.
Tell us
Yeah,
a little
we
bit
do.
about that program, and that'll be a great place to kick off our show today.
Well, we have 26 million pages of manuscript documents, and only 300,000 of them remain security classified. And it just so happens that that's one of them.
He's very excited about that. So that sophomore class is an ongoing project, is it not? They come here every year?
Every year.
Okay.
Right, Abilene High School sophomores come here and do research. They first have sort of an introduction to doing primary research in a history lab with our education specialist and archivist on our staff, and learn the difference like between a primary document and a secondary document and what they're going to encounter here in the research room. And then they come over here for a few days of research with these original materials from the Eisenhower administration, and then make a presentation to their speech class. So it's really kind of a rite of passage for Abilene High School students.
Yeah, it's one of the huge benefits of living and working
That's right.
and playing in Abilene, Kansas, America. It's unparalleled. First of all, that they can come to a place like this and do this, but this is Dwight David Eisenhower's place. Why Like Ike? They're going to think a world of Ike when they leave here.
And one of their fellow Abilene High School classmates.
That's right.
So not everybody had a president who went to their high school. So it really is a unique opportunity for the kids who live here.
One of the topics is Dwight D. Eisenhower Boyhood Years, and the 1909 Abilene High School yearbook is one of the sources that they use.
That's just very cool. We can see most of the labels as we sit here at the table, and it's just, as we present on Why Like Ike all the time, the topics are just...
Oh, that's right. You could see everything from the first nuclear submarine to Native Americans under Dwight Eisenhower, thermonuclear policy, the Salk polio vaccine, the Middle East, as you said, the boyhood years, and just on and on. I mean, the range of topics that you can explore here related to the life of Eisenhower is really unlimited.
There's 48 topics they can choose from.
48? That's outstanding. I see one of the things that we have talked about over and over on this program is how relevant the administration years of Dwight David Eisenhower is to today. And it just rang a bell with me as I saw it. It says Homeland Security Civil Defense Program. I don't know if Homeland Security was a label then. You might be able to tell me, but the Civil Defense Program certainly was, and it led us to Homeland Security.
It was known as civil defense then, but it's really the same thing.
Same thing.
And there was much greater fear of a nuclear attack back in the 1950s, and so there were drills at schools and businesses, and rather than calling them nuclear attack drills, they called them civil defense, which is a little less frightening than the prospect of a nuclear attack.
Till you get under that desk and you look up at all that gum.
That's right.
So, okay, so I had a lead-in to the show, and you said that's interesting. So here's what I want to do one of these days, and you may have to hold me accountable to this as a friend, okay? I want to spend a vacation here in this room. I have a specific time period in World War II and 2 geographic trails. One's North Africa, the other one is the re-entry to the Philippines. And I want to spend a week researching those 2 trails. What I'm going to do with it, I don't know, but the reason is my family.
Right.
Okay? So, and I live in Abilene, Kansas. How can I miss this opportunity?
Well, it's here, and in addition to having President Eisenhower's pre-presidential, presidential, and post-presidential papers, we have the records of about almost 500 of his political and military associates, and we also have Army unit records.
Yeah.
which trace the activities of those units in the Pacific and European theaters throughout the war. They become very popular, not just with academic military historians, but family historians who want to trace their grandfather's or father's or uncle's service in World War II.
And that's my primary interest. My name is Weiss. That starts with a W, and the 1972 fire in the St. Louis archives for the Army wiped out S through Z, sort of a thing. And so most of those Army records were destroyed.
That's right.
I am betting that I could accomplish what I would like to do from the unit records, and they're here.
Yeah, very often they have luck, and they, even if they can't find a specific reference to their relative, they can at least find out what his unit was doing and on certain dates, and sometimes their names will pop up.
Yeah.
And so it does give them just that much more information about what their relative did during World War II.
And I say that for another reason. We're here working under the program name of Why Like Ike. We're here promoting the visibility of the Presidential Library and Dwight David Eisenhower. And here's the point. If I can come spend my vacation here doing research, so can you. All you have to do is make a call, make an arrangement, tell us how that works.
Well, your first stop is with an archivist at the Eisenhower Library, and you can contact us by phone, email, or a written letter, and they'll respond to you. And they'll do a preliminary search of our holdings and tell you what is relevant to your topic. And then when you arrive, you'll meet the archivist, and they bring you into the research room. You fill out a researcher application, provide a photo ID, and we have lots of reference materials for you to use. And eventually they'll pull you boxes and bring them into the research room, and you can get started.
And then I can write my book, get it to the New York Times bestseller list.
There you go.
And then the
Could
second
retire.
vacation's in the Caribbean.
Well, for example, as Chelsea was just mentioning, our finding aids and subject guides. For example, here's one on Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion. We also have all this material on our website as well, so they can do a lot of the
searchable.
Yeah, they can do a lot of that sort of preliminary research before they ever come in. And also something we should mention in terms of the type of research they may not associate with us is our public access computers here behind us through the National Archives, which is our parent agency. They can get access to Ancestry.com and a lot of nice commercial databases at no charge.
I didn't know that.
And do a lot of that genealogical research here.
ProQuest history, news articles.
Old newspapers. So
all of that's new information to me, so I bet it's new information to you at home. Okay, so how long have you worked in the research room?
14 years.
14 years. Then you have
She grew up here, actually.
She grew up here.
I did. I graduated from Abilene High School.
Went straight from the sophomore class to here.
Grew up in the research room. Yeah.
I did, pretty much.
So I remember sitting with Carl Weisenbach one time, and I think he rough numbers, but he said there were 28 books released about Eisenhower in this time frame that we were talking about. And the researchers were at an all-time record that year for researchers. Here's my point. We host a lot of people who come from a long ways away to sit here and do research about the Dwight David Eisenhower years and all of the topics that are available. And they write a lot of books, make movies, Monuments Men.
Write books in a lot of different languages.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes the researchers will send us copies of books in Italian, of, Hungarian, you name the languages.
Do you do the review on the Hungarian?
Yeah, it's pretty quick since I can't read any of it. But it looks nice. But no, you make a good point. We get anywhere between 600 and 800 researchers a year. About 25% are from abroad, whether UK, Japan, you name it. They do come from around the world because there is that worldwide interest in his military career, his presidency. The Cold War is still a very active research area. And we have the added advantage, since he did have the military career, about 20 or 25% of our researchers are interested in that aspect.
Right.
Plus the family historians that we mentioned who want to trace Grandpa's service. So it really is much broader than I think most people would imagine.
And I'm always just astounded by the breadth of the availability here, of what you can see, what you can read, and what you can learn. So exciting for me to come in this morning, even though I knew about the sophomore class coming. My son is in it, told me all about it, and I've heard about it before. It's different when you see it. So I walk in and I see all these kids, total silence in the room. heads down, reading, writing. It was a transfixing picture for me to see that. Well, we've said this on Why Like Ike before, but seeing it's different than just knowing it. And
It is.
That's
It's different to see a,
yeah.
A document quoted in a book, and then to actually have that firsthand encounter with
Yeah.
it, and become engaged with it. And some of the students last week who had the history lab, where they were just getting the introduction to the research process, were so excited that they came in here on their own later that afternoon and started their research early. So you never know what sort of interest that you're going to start in someone's life, and maybe lead to a career in history or teaching or archives. So.
yeah.
My favorite story is
Excuse me.
retired archivist Jim Wyershoff says that one time he was working with the group, and the student called him over and said, "But this isn't what I read in the book. I'm looking at the document here in front of me, but this is not
That's
what
right.
I
This
read in the book.
contradicts.
What am I wrong? Am I reading it wrong?" Jim said, "No, you're now the authority on the topic."
You're the historian.
Yeah, that's a great story. We will never know all of the things that came from these young people that were in the room this morning, and will be
right.
again this afternoon. I'm hoping for my son leads to great things, doesn't every parent? But not every parent has the ability to send their son to the Dwight David Eisenhower
right, to have
Library
one in
to
their
do
town.
research.
And library is kind of a misleading word because we're actually in archives. We have 30,000 books, but our primary mission is the preservation, protection, and providing of the historical documents that are in our holdings.
And you have way more than 30,000 pages.
Yeah, 26 million or some.
26
Give or take.
million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we provide them to researchers in boxes like this. They started out in filing cabinets, and eventually they end up in what we call Hollinger boxes. And this makes it easy to carry. It also has some preservation factors to it. The folders, you can see. And our researchers have to use this under observation. Our staff watches them at all times. We're making sure people aren't putting materials into the files to create evidence that supports their topic, or removing them because some of them are very valuable. They have to use an out card to mark the home location of the folder. And then while they're using the materials, everything has to stay flat and completely on the table, and they turn the documents over one at a time. You can't remove it. They can't decide, oh, I'm really interested in this one, so I'm going to sit it off to the side here. And in archives, you preserve the context of the materials, so you can see how the decisions were made as time went on. We don't typically take everything that's on China and put it in boxes labeled China. So the Secretary of State's papers are provided to our researchers exactly as they were created.
And that's one key difference between a library, as most people understand it, and an archives. The Abilene Public Library, the material is organized by subject. Within an archives, it's organized by who created it. And so we don't take all the records, say, about China from the records of the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and the President, and combine them all. We keep them arranged to how they were created by those three entities, because that does have meaning. That context has so much meaning. Another thing that's interesting that you can probably see is the pink sheet at the beginning of this file, and that means that at one time a document was removed, probably for either security classification or because of personal information that was included. And so until that information is declassified by the agency that created it, the researcher sees that that pink sheet has replaced it, and they can then make a request to have that document reviewed.
Yeah, and a placeholder is typically exactly where that document should have been. And
Again, maintaining that context and that original order. So.
It's astounding to a person like myself who does not naturally orient around that meticulous a process. It's fantastic, the efforts that have been gone through for the preservation of history as it occurred, and that's what it takes to do it. Frankly, also, it gives some context to what you see in the news every day about how serious it is that you make those efforts to preserve history, not just for today, for the people that are living it, but how important it is for the people who follow us that history is preserved correctly.
Yes. I deserve to see it the same way as the person before me, and the person after me should see it exactly the same as I did.
Wow.
And that American citizens have as much right to see it as a government official or a professional historian or a well-known writer. You know, everybody has the same access to these records.
And that's very exciting. You know, I don't think too many people think about that every day. I think about Dwight David Eisenhower and his library frequently with my interactions with you, and I certainly don't think about that.
Well, that's
every
another good
day.
point, because most countries don't have institutions like this. In fact, we had a group of Afghanistan students a number of years ago, and they said, you would never have this in our country. The citizens would not have the records, to examine the decisions that their government had taken over the years.
Yeah.
So that, again, it's unique to the United States and some other Western countries.
This great experiment in freedom called the United States of America is truly unique in the world, the history of the world. Maybe we take that for granted because we're here and we have the opportunity to be in this building, but it truly is. There's never been a freer place than the United States of America in the history of the world. There's never been a place where more beneficial things were done for people. Jonas Salk, I'm assuming,
The
polio vaccine.
which,
The 8 years of peace and prosperity from Dwight David Eisenhower, those phrases go together. 8 years of peace and prosperity was spread across the world. Not just 8 years of peace and prosperity for America, but America spread the peace and spread that prosperity worldwide. Many of the places today that are now benefiting from that sprang forth after World War II under the Eisenhower administration.
the Marshall Plan that began under President Truman.
Yeah.
Rebuilt Western Europe. So.
Very-
But it is all related. I mean, from the access to the records to the freedoms that we enjoy, it is all part of our political culture.
So what's the hardest question a student has ever asked you?
Oh, I never say I don't know. I always say, well, I know how to find out.
Okay.
I'm an information expert rather than a subject expert.
Okay. In other words, it doesn't.
There is no hard
There is no
question.
hard question. She just goes and looks.
Well, and sometimes there's an assumption that everything that Dwight Eisenhower ever did is recorded. That every letter he ever wrote was preserved from the time he was a child to every person he ever met, that there was a photograph of him taken with that person. Every soldier who drove his Jeep
Right.
during his Army days. So.
I would say it's never fun to demyth the family myth.
Their connection to Eisenhower.
Yes.
Or just
Yeah.
not to be able to answer their question, because that's really what we're here to do. And so we always try to at least find, alternate routes they could take perhaps to find an answer if it's not here.
And our job is not to interpret the materials. So oftentimes we can provide it, but we can't necessarily answer their question exactly the way they expect us to.
Wow, this has been very informative for me. Your responses to that question have just expanded my understanding of what it means to have an archive and what it means to be an archivist. And also what it means to the people who are watching, what they can come here and do. Reiterating, you can come here. You can make an appointment to be in this room. You can search these records the same as anybody else in the world is available.
And I would
to search.
encourage everyone to do that. Our topics are so varied. We have 48 topics for our high schoolers, but that you could research anything.
It really is unlimited.
Yeah.
So as I walked in and we're setting up the camera, I just walked some of the pictures, and you and I stopped, and right over here, there's a fellow who's, there is President Eisenhower, and there's the Shah of Iran.
That's right.
And young Queen Elizabeth
Very young Queen
is over
Elizabeth.
there. So seeing these pictures of history, and Roy Rogers is up there as well. It's just fascinating to me to see the pictures.
Well, the range of Eisenhower's acquaintances, from world leaders to the actor Bob Hope, the golfer Arnold Palmer. I mean, he had a wide range of friends and associates, and that was one of his strengths as president. I mean, before he was president, he was always already on a first-name basis with people like Winston Churchill and other world leaders.
It's a constant reminder to me about leadership, of which Dwight David Eisenhower exhibited about a high of characteristics in leadership as one can exhibit in the world. But it's formed on being able to have a relationship with people and motivate them to cooperate with you to achieve a task. And gosh, did he do that very well.
That was his talent. That really was.
Yeah. So good to be here, Chelsea. Thank you, Tim, as always. Thank you for your participation in Why Like Ike. I think this is maybe the most exciting one for me that we've done. I just can't tell you, folks watching, how thrilling it is to sit here and look at 48 place cards that sophomores in high school have access to through this program. You should take the time to talk to a sophomore in high school about this. Come here yourself. Do some research on your favorite topic, anything Eisenhower. So, you know, an inspirational thought as we leave, Tim? What would it be for you?
Oh, gosh.
Come on, you're an inspirational guy.
Well, let's see. Just that you can encounter history firsthand at the Eisenhower Library, and you can make those decisions for yourself as to what those documents mean.
Perfect, perfect. Chelsea?
Oh, goodness. Put me on the spot there. I love being that first line, the preservation, protection, and providing of the documents. I'm not just protecting the documents, I'm also protecting your right to the documents.
That's a good point.
You can't have said it any better than that. Very well. Folks, we hope you've enjoyed Why Like Ike. We have sure enjoyed producing it for you.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you again. For Eagle Communications, I'm Dennis Weiss, Tim Reeves, Chelsea Milner. You have a great day.